o'clock. Can you hear me on the HW cam? We are on HW cam tonight. Okay, testing. Do you want us to turn our mics off?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Turn the PA down a little bit.
So we don't have to turn them on and off. We can just leave them as they are. Okay, great. Thank you. Let me then, since it's 7 o'clock and we have a quorum, call to order the planning board meeting of the town of Wenham for Thursday, February 9th, 2023. We're live in the select board's hearing room, and with me, I guess I don't have to announce everybody.
This would be Peter
because
Clay.
Peter Clay.
Dan Pasquarello.
Dan Pasquarello and David Anderson. I'm Ann Weeks. I'm the chair. I'm so used to being on Zoom where I introduce everybody. We have the first item on the agenda is a continued public hearing on Spring Hill Farm subdivision on the petition by Spring Hill Ventures LLC and I'm not going to read the address, for an amendment to a previously approved definitive subdivision decision for Spring Hill Farms located on the easterly side of Dodges Row, and the property is Assessor's Map 39, lots 8, 11, and 11 through 27. This was continued from January 12th, 2023. There's questions about trees, street trees, and planting, and we have not received anything more from the applicant. So I need a motion to continue this to the next meeting.
I motion that we continue this to the next meeting.
I need a second.
Second.
So moved, so seconded. All in favor, aye?
Yes?
Yes?
Aye.
Aye. The next meeting being,
March.
March
March
9th, 2023.
That's
So
10 p.m.
if anyone is here for that, yes, do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Excellent.
Has the applicant submitted any paperwork to get the road accepted at the town meeting coming up in the spring?
I cannot answer that question. Margaret could answer that question for you, and she is in the Community Preservation Committee meeting currently. Peter, do you know?
Peter, is it on the warrant?
Peter, is it on the warrant?
No.
It's not on the warrant?
Pretty sure it's not.
That means they haven't submitted anything.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I know you're going to have a continuance, but I probably won't be there. I was the former technical owner.
Would you just state your name so that,
West,
thank you.
I own the property on behalf of my mother. And
Yes.
I remember the planning that went into it, and I do hope they don't waive the 2-tree planting, which is required on each of the lots, if that's what they're seeking to do, because the amount of trees they took down is so much more than we were told were going to be taken down. And so there was a requirement that the 19 lots each have a 2-tree planting on the street side.
yes, we understand.
Waiver of that. So I know it's a continuance, so you don't have to take my comment, but
No, I think you'll find the board has similar sentiments, but we're trying to work with the neighbors to make sure, that people who own the property at this point, to make sure that the spirit of what was intended in the original is preserved in such a way that everybody benefits, both
that makes sense.
folks on the ground right now who've made investment, and also people who drive by and would like to have that shade tree view, if you like. So, aesthetic. Anyway, thank you. The next items we have are administrative, and the first one is the presentation of the master plan existing conditions report by J.M. Golson. And I know Jen Golson is here, and the chairman of the Master Plan Advisory Committee is here too, and I'm happy to see folks in the audience who are interested in this, so that's terrific. I wonder how you would like to proceed with this, Jen.
So we have a presentation that we'd like to share, and I don't know that we're mic'd over here, so I don't know if you want.
I can pull it over.
Okay.
You could use this one, probably?
All right.
Should be long enough.
Okay, great. And is this comfortable for everyone if we're in this corner here? Is that okay for you? Okay, good.
Yeah, there's more slack too.
Oh, there's more slack? Okay,
It's just caught.
great. All right, good. Well, thank you so much. We're really happy to be here. You'll see as part of this process of doing the master plan, we like to have a rhythm of times that we come to the planning board towards the end of a big deliverable where we'd like to share it with you, talk about what's been happening in the master plan. And I know that, you know, you're alternating members of the planning board to come to these master plan advisory committee meetings, and they're also keeping you in the loop, but we feel it's a nice rhythm to just have time with you to give you an update, let you know what we've come up with so far, let you know what the next steps are, and take any questions that you have. And so we have I don't want to say it's short because I don't want to lie to you. It's a little bit of a lengthy presentation, but we'll try to move through it pretty quickly. And I have my colleagues here. Beverly Messazent is new with J.M. Goldson, and she is stepping in to assist with this project, so you'll hear a bit from her as well. And then we have Dan Hodge here, who's from Cambridge Econometrics, and he is focused on the economic development and the fiscal impact piece. So you're going to hear quite a number of things tonight, and what I typically say is that if the planning board, you know, in the presentation has any questions about what we're presenting in the moment, I would prefer, and I didn't ask my colleagues if they agree, but I would prefer just to be interrupted and you can ask the question rather than waiting for a half an hour and say, oh, go back to slide 3. And then you know, I don't know if you also want to take public questions at any time. That's more up to you, but I would rather, if you have a question on the content, to just ask it in the moment.
Okay. If people are here from the public, shall we have them raise their hand? Just as if you were on Zoom, you can put that hand up and we'll call on you.
Great,
If
good.
you're comfortable with that, that's what we'll do.
That sounds great to me. So we're going to be going, we're just going to give, the existing conditions report is very detailed, so we're not going to go over everything. But we'll give you just an overview of some of what we felt were the key findings. You may read the draft report and feel like, oh, why didn't they talk about this or that? I think those are key findings too. And so if you've already read the report and we gloss over anything tonight, you're welcome to speak up and say, well, what about this other thing? And then we just want to share the next steps in the process. We're in what we call phase 2 of the process. And I'm stealing Beverly's thunder a little bit. I'm sorry. I just kept going, and I was supposed to hand it over. How about you do the end? Okay, good. Because where I see my next slide is where I was supposed to start. So I'll just keep going here. So this existing conditions report, it seems like, to some folks it might seem like a very dry part of the master plan. But for us, it's really important to just establish a foundation of understanding. And that's really what it is. It's a lot for us to understand the town, but it's also for the community because they may know certain things about the town and maybe they don't know other things about the town. And so it's a place just to put some general information together in one report. And then as we start to dig into strategies in phase 3 and action plan items in phase 4, we start to look back at that report and we may find that, oh, now that this one strategy is coming up, I realize I need to dig a little deeper on something to really write the strategy properly. So it's not the end of what we're doing in terms of learning about the community, but it's really just our start. And we like to leave you with a report that you can have as part of the process, but it always remains a separate document from the plan itself. It's really such a detailed piece of work that we find it doesn't lend itself to creating an accessible master plan document if you put the whole report in your master plan. So we typically do a brief summary. So that's just describing sort of what this report is and what it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we know. We get it.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yes, and I know, and I don't mean to sound like I'm repeating things. I also know that we're being recorded and people at home may be watching who maybe aren't as familiar with this process. So I hope you'll be patient with me as I know I tend to backtrack and just explain some things over that you've heard before.
I think that's terrific. And the more people who participate in this from town, the better.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So we are in this phase 2 here, Wenham tomorrow. And this phase, Beverly will talk more about, but this is really understanding what the town wants to do in the future. So this is a new phase that we've entered into recently. The next thing we'll do is go over phase 3, which will be June through November. And that's when some people are maybe chomping at the bit already to get into strategies. That's when we get into strategies. And then at the end, we do December through March is really making those the final plan. That's when you'll see the plan for the first time laid out as a master plan. You'll see an action plan, and that's when it will all come together. Okay, so let me go over the topics we'll cover tonight. We're going to start with Dan talking about economic development and fiscal impact, and we're going to spend the most time talking about that. I think there's certainly a lot of interest in the community to learn what Dan has to say, particularly around fiscal impacts and potential opportunities, and then I'll cover much more briefly the rest of the topics in just a slide or two for each. Okay, Dan? Great.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Nice to be with you all this evening. Yeah, so we'll jump right into, we've got a few slides on economic development findings and considerations. Like Jen said, happy to be interrupted with questions, and there's tons more in the draft report. So just a few high-level findings here. Wenham does have a very highly educated population who in general tend to work in high-paying jobs. This is probably no surprise to the people in this room. In terms of the, let's see, most Wenham residents work outside of the town. Again, not a big surprise, probably known as a bedroom community in various ways. We sometimes measure what's called a jobs to population ratio, which was at 0.25 in a net flow of 500 outflow of commuters. I presented some similar commuting data earlier today, and one of the key points or caveats there is that data is pre-pandemic. So, with work from home and hybrid situations, that data is pretty quickly outdated and needs to be assessed kind of fresh as you're thinking about economic opportunities and where economic development, yes, it means businesses, but it also means attracting residents and workers who can who will both live and spend money in your community. In terms of the jobs available in Wenham, a lot of them are in the educational services sector, with Gordon College being the, we believe, largest #1 employer. And then last one there on the bottom right, most of the town is zoned residential, relatively few designated commercial parcels. So, what are some of the big picture takeaways in economic development in Wenham? There are relatively few businesses operating in the town. Don't want to minimize the ones that are here. Certainly critical and important to the local economy. But, in terms of the master plan, some of our questions are, do we want to encourage new business formation? If so, what kinds of businesses best suit Wenham? We have been doing some outreach and interviews with various stakeholders, so we're starting to gather information and ideas around that. Second one there, given existing zoning and the available or what properties could be developed for commercial development, there's a relatively small number that we're starting to investigate in greater detail. So a high-level question is what areas of the town are best placed or could be prioritized for redevelopment, and then
Can I just ask you a question? Why do you use the term redevelopment?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, that's a common term in Massachusetts in the sense that so many parcels did have a previous use. There are some sites that perhaps have not
We
yet.
don't.
Okay.
We have like 2% that's commercial.
Well, it's
Unless the
developed.
unless
It's developed, because it's
developed
developed land, it just has to be redeveloped, right, as something else. I think, isn't that what the term means?
Yeah, so like an existing property that may be used for something else or might be underutilized, you could still theoretically consider that redevelopment, but I guess I don't want to get hung up or overemphasize the nuance between, you know, the two. In some cases, it could be, you know, what you might call a greenfield property, which has, you know, no uses on it. And in some cases, it could have an existing use, but could be prime for a conversion of some sort.
I would, just to be picky, I would say development or redevelopment,
Okay,
please.
okay.
I'm curious about the point, not to belabor it though, but what's your
So if you
example
go
of a
to Iron,
development?
if you go to Iron Rail, you stop at the Scout Barn, and you walk up that path, or the dirt road that goes back to Iron Rail Cemetery, that's virgin territory. And we're doing a feasibility study on it. That's development. And it's probably the biggest opportunity we have in the town.
What would be an example of redevelopment to you?
Well, it's, so the rest of Iron Rail, you know, you get all these existing businesses, not counting the DPW. Yeah, that could be redeveloped.
Okay, fair enough.
Is it all one parcel?
Yeah.
So
we own it,
You'd have
the
to
town.
but we'd have to decide, it's all one parcel, so it's a little bit of redevelopment and a little bit of development. I think it's semantics, but we take your point.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the third one is, you know, based on kind of our work to date, you know, residents generally want to preserve small-town charm of Wenham, and open space is an important part of the town's characteristics. So, you know, how do we encourage economic development that still aligns, you know, with the resident values? And, you know, that relates to helping to, you know, determine what are the best or prime kind of opportunities for development or redevelopment.
So I was asked that question. Margaret sent a note copying you guys on that, and I wrote back on the economic development one. And I said, you said what type of businesses? Like retail, restaurants, or commercial? And I said commercial, and the example that you had was biotech. So you guys saw that, right?
Yes, the crown,
Yeah.
for the covenant, yep.
Right.
So I hope you guys agree with that.
Well, I mean, I want to see the whole thing in context. I want to go on to phase 2. I want to get beyond the
Okay.
existing conditions and start asking fun questions. So I think that's the beginning of what this is. This is just the beginning, right, of the conversation, not the end.
Very much so, yeah. Turning towards some of the fiscal considerations, so when we look at the Wenham Town revenues, 80% come from property taxes. Of that, 98% are generated from residential property taxes, which is a very high percentage compared to, you know, surrounding or comparable towns. The average single-family tax bill is relatively high. This is a combination of both the high assessed value for homes as well as a relatively high tax rate. And then in terms of annual expenditures, about half go towards education. And our finding was that Wenham's share of students in the school district is increasing a bit in recent years.
Sorry, I'm gonna keep interrupting. Could you go back to that last slide? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't know, you don't know, and that's, I would understand that. In terms of comparable towns, how do these, the figures in the top left compare?
So that is in the draft existing conditions report. I'm pretty certain that Wenham was the highest. There were some,
With Boxford.
okay. And then there was a couple of others, I believe, that were, you know, in the low to mid 90s, and then, you know, and then there's a bit of a you know, a range, of course, if you're, you know, talking some of the larger cities and things like that. But most of our comparisons that we did were in similar, you know, roughly similar towns.
Yeah, so think Boxford. They were just below us.
But like Hamilton?
No.
We don't have a commercial base. I mean,
Yeah, I
Hamilton,
understand.
yeah, so.
I'm
that's-
just wondering how far, I mean, is Hamilton at 60%? What's the delta?
It's in there.
Oh,
I mean,
it's,
I
it
can
is in
follow
there.
up, I can take a look.
It's in the,
Yeah,
it's probably more like 70.
I'll try to find it.
Oh, okay. Okay,
It's
great.
okay, I'll review it later.
Yeah.
I apologize, I must have missed that.
No, it's fine. It's, wow, Joanne really reviewed this in detail. Here, let me hand this back so I can finish going through things. So the next slide starts to get at some what-if questions around if you were going to shift some of your
Oh, it's really interesting.
tax base towards more commercial uses. So this first one is, to try to maintain your existing level of revenues, but decrease the tax rate by 2 or 5%. And you can see what the new rate, would be at those different levels. How much additional commercial tax base or assessed value would you need? And then what is a rough estimate of the amount of square footage of building if your current ratio of building size to assessed value held true? And you can see that, it's significant.
I can't relate to square footage. So the 247,000, okay.
Well,
What do you think this building is?
a typical house is anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000.
Right. In Wenham, it might be more.
And
but-
so, like a pretty good-sized warehousing building is 100,000 square feet. So, 247,000 is a lot. It would probably be multiple office buildings and I haven't done that exact calculation yet to see, the exact building types, but it is significant.
It'd be really helpful if you could give us, like, this is what the building would look like.
Okay. Yeah, that's a
Depends on how tall it is, too, of course,
Yeah.
right?
Well, right, yeah. Because, right, so for example, if you had a 3-story office building and each story had, say 10,000 square feet, that gets you 30,000 right there. But that's 30,000 out of,
At 2%, it's got to be a big building.
Correct.
Or-
Or a number of buildings.
or a number of buildings. That's right. Yeah.
Angus,
Just a quick question on the tax rate that really was the last slide, when we talked about being amongst the highest for our comps. Is it true that in Essex County, our 1.73 is the #1 highest tax rate?
It was a number of years ago. I don't know
No,
if it's
it
still true
still
now.
is.
I saw, it was on, somebody put it on the website, the listing of all the towns in Essex, we were #1.
Right.
here's the crazy thing, is our tax rate actually decreased slightly.
I was gonna say, wasn't it over
But
18?
it's still,
Yeah, it was just a teeny bit.
but it's still the highest,
Yeah, so,
Highest in,
which is why this
Essex.
is so important.
yeah, so I've got the data from the report here. So, right, so the 98% of property taxes from residential is the highest of the comparison towns. The comparison towns included Boxford, Essex, Hamilton, Topsfield, and West Newbury. And those ranged from, the lowest of those was 91% in Essex to 97% in Boxford and West Newbury. And they all have tax rates that are a little bit lower than Wenham's.
You're probably going to get to this, but I'm curious about the difference between revenue generation from single-family house development and commercial development. My general sense is we're much better off with some thoughtful, careful commercial development than we are with continued residential expansion, but maybe if that's later in your presentation.
It is not in this presentation. That would be that would be sort of going
Phase
further
two,
on
that's phase
phase
two,
2 and 3 of, because
Okay.
this is where we're kind of shifting from what's existing to what
Right, what we
ifs and
want.
what the scenarios might be, and that's
Fun
one of the
stuff.
one of the things that as a team we need to, help define. So this is in some ways just a kind of a taster of that first part of analysis.
Fair. Thank you.
This is a similar but different type of assessment here, where if you were going to increase revenues for the town by 2, 5, or 10%, how much assessed value and square footage again, I know.
I mean,
So,
a
so,
chart with
so-
the third option, I mean, there's no way that's happening. We'd have to, like.
Right, this is
basic-
just to show you. This
Right,
isn't
but-
because anyone's recommending it. This is just existing conditions and to show us what the reality is, I think.
That, I think Beverly Cummings Center is 1.3 million. So that last option's about like a Cummings Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a property like that.
No.
right, and so, to some extent, these numbers are, while not done to be like prescriptive, they might give you some sense of what is realistic and what's not. And so, in our interviews with stakeholders, it was a very common theme of ideally wanting to increase the commercial tax base and help alleviate some of the burden on residential taxpayers. And so, what are some of the opportunities there? This starts to give some numbers to that. There's a lot more work to do in phases 2 and 3 on that, both in terms of the analysis like this and honing that in better, and that's helpful feedback about trying to better understand, for example, what is, like, for example, what might be a typical, 3 or 4 story office building in terms of square feet, or, a few different use types to give that a little bit more context. And then also, to where you were going in terms of going deeper on some of the potential commercial development site opportunities in the town, and both what those could be, what should be prioritized, and what some next steps might be. Because it's one thing to identify it, it's another thing to think about how it actually gets positioned for private sector interest.
I have one more question, I'm sorry. I know you want to get through this and go home before midnight, but this was described, on the previous slide, it was commercial base that needed to increase. Do these numbers change a lot if it's like an not heavy industry, but Peter was talking about biotech, so that kind of high-tech office space, is the number is going to be different, right?
Well, the assessed value number wouldn't be different. The conversion to the square footage would vary based on the type of business.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, if you want to increase revenues by 2%, that's a pretty easy thing to, it's just take your existing, multiply it by, 1.02, and that's essentially your number. It's then a matter of like how do you relate that to potential commercial development, and what kind of value would you get? For example, what's the relationship of value to square footage for something like say a biotech building?
Exactly. I just know
because that could be a higher value building per square foot, for example.
Okay, so that was my question. Thanks.
Right. Then say, your typical mom and pop retail store or
Right.
something like that.
And this is more like commercial space, like. When you say
This right
commercial-
now is generic commercial space, and it's largely based on your existing mix. And
Yeah,
so,
okay.
and so that's, again, this is something where we're going to have to go further, and it's where I think, pulling some comps from maybe some surrounding towns, like especially if we have some examples that we want to think about, like, what if it was like an office building like this
Right.
in Essex, or what if it was
Yeah, I'm
New
guessing
England bio,
This is to
whatever.
illustrate mostly the difference between residential and commercial,
Yes.
right? That's what you're getting at? So
Yeah.
the distinction between commercial and industrial is going to be closer than, or
Can I
Yes.
residential.
ask a
Right, no,
question,
no
though?
question. I
I
just
think
wondered.
our tax rate for residential and commercial is the same.
It is. It is. You have a single tax rate, so it's then a matter of, like, relationships of value of the property to the size of the property.
And I'm guessing that Beverly, the commercial rate's not as high as the residential rate.
I mean, in most towns, so towns typically have either a single tax rate. Most smaller towns have a single tax rate. And I haven't looked up Beverly. I don't think that was one of our comparisons, just because it's a significantly larger town. Towns that have a split tax rate, the tax rate is typically higher, almost always higher for the commercial industrial than it is for residential.
Oh, great. That's,
So, for example, I was just down in New Bedford. We're working on a plan for the city of New Bedford. Theirs is a fairly extreme example, but their commercial industrial tax rate is, at least double what it is for their residential.
Yeah.
wow.
I'm sure there's a sweet spot, because you don't want to lose
I like that.
business. Thank you.
I think, Jen, do you guys take over on the demographics and housing section? So I think, I think we've covered most of this in the discussion. Yeah, I think everything that is on this slide we've just talked about in some form. And I just repeat what I said before about how, as we move towards phases 2 and 3, that's where we're going to go deeper on this kind of fiscal analysis of different development types and options, and what the revenue implications could be.
Question from the audience,
Just a
Mr. West.
question, will your current assessment, when you're tricking a fiscal position for a town, there are two parts to the equation, what comes in and what goes out.
Right.
This is all revenues.
That's right.
What goes out, the expense side, will you be doing that assessment? Because I'm always wondering, is our $22 million budget, for what we spend on schools, for instance, comparable or excessive relative to other towns? Because you could get to the same place on lowering the rate by having lower expenses as raising the revenue. So this is a current assessment, and I know you're planning boards, which this is really a finance committee question, but will you cover that as part of your planning, current assessment?
Our intention is to take into account both sides of that ledger, like a fiscal impact analysis considers not just the revenue coming in, but also the expenditure side. I know from conversations in Wenham, there's, been discussions around, different housing types, and if you're bringing in housing that might have families and therefore school kids, that has some expenditure implications. Commercial businesses also have expenditure implications. It's not zero, but it's a different kind of mix and relationship.
So Angus, are you asking whether these guys are going to start modeling the cost of the school?
I don't know if that's gonna be part of it, but I just wanted to point out a fiscal analysis that only looks at how do I raise revenues, when what you're trying to do, for instance, is to assess how do we get the tax rate down to a reasonable level compared to other towns. You do it by either raising your revenues, which is more development, or lowering your expenses.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be
That's not a
happening.
planning board thing.
Yeah, I don't think lowering the expenses is within the scope of this. This is just simply, how should land be used in Wenham for the next 20 years?
I guess
I
it's only in
think-
the feedback probably through that, what you were just
Right.
saying, the generating of additional expense from the different models that you're gonna.
Yeah, well, which kind of development generates more expense for the town? That was kind of my point, is I think there's definitely a difference between the different, and we should know that.
I
I think.
sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry, I think that what we're seeing right now in Wenham, as far as the economic issue, the tax-based issue, is a function of our old master plan, which said that Wenham should be residential. That's what it says. And voila, Wenham is residential. But that was 1960, and that was a long time ago. So unfortunately, I think we're reaping what we sowed, and it, in a way, demonstrates how important this process is, that we get this right. So appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Jen, do you want to get you set up?
All right, thanks, Dan. So we started with Dan because I knew it would be probably the most interesting. So I'm going to go through ours pretty quickly. All right, so you may have read some of this, but I'll just give you some of the highlights. We looked at demographics and housing together as they're intricately entwined. And your population growth rate is actually uncertain. There are a lot of factors at play. You had grown pretty slowly over the past decade compared to other communities, and some of the projections that were before the 2020 census came out showed that you would grow at different rates, either faster or slower. And so we feel that the projections are just not reliable at this point. And I know that the state agencies are trying to update those.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have this broken out with the Gordon College students taken out?
We have
so that we can
tried.
figure
So
out-
it's not apples to apples. So we've done some analysis around, well, if you assume, that the 1,000+ students that are at Gordon, I have the number, I just don't have it in my head.
Right.
If you assume that they're in this 18 to 24-year-old range and you take them out, then this is what that means in terms of the percentage of your population for seniors, which comes out to about 25%, and your population for more middle-aged people. And so we've done the best we can, not being able to take it out completely because we can't separate, because there may be some 18, 24-year-olds who are not college students. So it's a little, it's a little tricky with just the two different data sets don't match up. But we've tried to explain that in the document, and we've made some best guesses. We just have to, not say that we absolutely are sure that this is how it plays out. Yeah.
Just wondered, just.
But we've tried to,
because of the way it was
yeah,
presented.
we have tried to account for that in each section of the demographics that would be affected, including racial demographics and age demographics, as well as overall population.
Jen, I'm sure this is in the report, but what's just the rough number for the Gordon students?
It's over 1,000. Yeah. I feel like it was 1,200 at one point, and it's fluctuated a little bit. I don't remember the exact number offhand.
In our overall 5,000, that's included?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and so you have about 30% more single-family housing. You're mostly single-family housing, and when we look at the rates in the county and the state, you have quite a bit of single-family housing, which is probably not surprising. You do have some multifamily, including Enon Village is an example that a lot of people would know. 3/4 of your households are family households. So you have a lot of family households. Not all of them have children, but a lot of them do. And then your median sales price have gone up a lot for single family, both for single family and for condos. And then we also looked at something called cost burden, just looking at how much are people spending toward housing costs here. And we find, not surprisingly either, that lower income households spend too much to stay in Wenham, basically. So we call them housing cost burdened. So we did do a bunch of focus groups when we started this project, just to try to understand when we're collecting data from perspectives of people in the community. And this is just, we've embedded some quotes from focus group people who have, talked about these different issues. And so I think it's an understatement to say Wenham's expensive.
When did you do these interviews?
Over the summer when we first started, yeah.
And you know what happened in terms of the assessment?
Yes, I have heard from our last meeting. Yes, yeah. So I suspect that in the process of the survey that's live now, we will hear more about that. Transportation and circulation. So you obviously have excellent vehicular connections. It was easy for me to get up here tonight, even with commuter traffic from Boston. But you also have very safe roads. You have, some crash sites, but you're not within the top crash sites in the state. You have both commuter rail stations, not in your borders, but certainly very nearby that Wenham can take advantage of. And there's also the van service, the COA, Council on Aging van service, that provides some limited on-demand services.
I will just say that the Hamilton Wenham station, part of it is in Wenham, and as a result, we
Okay,
have,
fair enough.
subject to the town,
Yes,
the overlay zone requirements that the state has imposed, so we're going to have to explore that.
yes. And you'll see us again regarding that because we're the state's consultant.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And we can stay for your next agenda item. We didn't realize it was on, but we saw it. We thought, well, we'll just stay for that. So challenges, cut through traffic in, residential neighborhoods. These roads are not really built for larger trucks and that type of vehicular traffic. Or we also looked at just the information that was available. We don't have a full inventory, but just the sidewalk conditions and availability. Low parking in the town center area for local businesses was something that came up, that there's plenty of parking for town hall and town business, town institutional, but not as much for the businesses. Most residents do drive to work, and it does seem like there's interest in improved pedestrian and bicycle improvements, particularly around the rail station. So this was one focus group participant. It's almost impossible to merge onto 1A during peak hours. All right, looking at cultural and historic resources, of course, one of the things that makes Wenham extremely special is not just your open space and scenic vistas and the feel of this community, but those historic resources that you have a lot of. And in 2017, I think you had your consultant to redo an updated townwide inventory, which found, documented a lot more than you had documented before. You have one historic district, one local historic district, I should say, all along Main Street. And then we also looked at cultural resources. So your museum is valued not just for the museum aspects of it, but for all the cultural events, and even the space that we were happy to use for the first forum. And then the other community events are also hosted by the town. So there seems to be a really thriving community here, including by town departments as well as private entities. So not much to say on that. We do have a picture there of the iron rail property, though. Really interesting history to read about the iron rail property. And so this was one focus group participant. I have concerns with the integrity of the historic district. So again, on Route 1A, but not about merging into traffic this time, but just concerns about the integrity of the historic district. They didn't give specifics. I'm not sure exactly what that was about.
Oh, so they're going nuts out here.
For the,
Lights?
oh, do you think that's what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, the historic integrity because of the transportation improvements.
Yes.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. All right. Sustainability, natural resources, water and energy. We really group these together. It's a big category. We also have another section just on open space and recreation. And we will correct this in the draft plan. I don't know why. One of our authors had a mind block, and we kept saying 2050 net zero carbon energy, but we've been corrected. We understand that it's a 2040 goal, which puts you 10 years closer to that goal. You have close to 30% of your town's total land area is protected open space. That's great. There's a global goal for sustainability of 30% of the world. In Massachusetts, that's only 20% in the total state. That's not to say that's enough. I'm not trying to make a judgment about should you stop or not. I'm just saying that that's impressive. And it's, of course, not all town-owned. You have other private entities that own land, too, including Audubon and I think trustees of reservations as well. Wenham Public Facilities have increased, your green community, which you probably know, and despite lots of efforts around reductions for energy use in street lights with LED lights and municipal vehicle energy use, the public facilities, including iron rail in particular, and police uses a lot of energy as well, have increased energy use. So there's some counteractive forces going on that the town's having trouble meeting those goals that were set out, pretty ambitiously years ago. Local water conservation efforts are something that residents talk a lot about in terms of the bans that happen every summer. And of course, those are exacerbated by droughts, which are predicted to happen more and more frequently with climate change. And the other thing that we heard a lot from our interviews and focus groups is just the kind of the disparity around, it seems a little unfair that you provide water to other communities, Salem, Beverly, and they don't have water bans, and it's the same aquifer that you're all drawing from.
Sometime later, I should tell you about Bruce Tarr's.
Yeah, we talked about that at one of the previous meetings. The agreement that was reached recently amongst the
And now they've done 3 different
Cape
things.
Ann communities, yeah,
It will all be done by June.
Essex communities.
And actually, talking to Eric Mansfield, our water lead, Wenham residents actually used less water in the last year.
Per
and-
capita
yeah.
than we usually do.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'd love more information on that too, when you
There's
get.
an initiative to
Great.
try to get rid of some of that disparity and share the burden a little bit more equitably. That was spearheaded by our local senator.
All right, that's great. I'm not sure that we knew that. Okay, no regional water brand, yeah, and we just talked about that. All right, under open space and recreation, of course, you share recreation department with Hamilton along with a bunch of other services. Private groups and associations own many of the sites, which I mentioned before. And this map is actually showing that. So the pink are open space and recreation properties that are owned by private for-profit. The light pink is municipally owned. The dark green is land trust owned. And the blue is state, which I don't know if we have any blue on that map. I'm not sure why that's there.
There is one little piece of state near Pleasant.
Oh, is it? Okay, it's hard to see in this. Okay.
There's one little,
All right, good. So I guess we'll keep the blue.
There,
no.
Huh.
middle top.
Yep.
One thing that was identified is maintenance needs and improvements in parks and playgrounds, athletic fields. And I know West Wenham Park is already, has an improvement plan that I believe is in the process of trying to be funded. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
One focus group participant pointed out no community center, no place for intergenerational activities.
One of the things on
you
the
go back on
docket
that?
for West Wenham, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. What do you call intergenerational activities?
Well,
With Graham.
yeah, I mean, I know in one of the other comments we saw, people talking about the senior center and the school population being in such close proximity, but not
Interact.
be interacting or getting together. And I don't know if that's the only thing they're talking about here. They may also talk about, most of the time parks are geared toward younger kids and not so much toward older adults. And I don't know if that's, I don't know in this particular participant's mind what they were talking about, but that's what I think of. Does that make sense?
I worked on a 3 or 5 year master plan process for Eric Tracy at the schools. And that was one of the points they wanted to increase.
More space at the school or on the
No,
school
more
property?
activities.
More places for people to meet and do things together, not just in multiple age groups.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great to know. I know that one of the members of our team followed up recently because is that plan now completed?
It's not, they're beautifying it.
Okay.
They're taking a heck
But
of
we
a
could
long
get a
time.
draft maybe. I think that's what we were trying to get.
I don't have a draft.
Okay.
Where would Jen go to find a draft, Peter?
I'll ask Eric. I gotta go see him tomorrow anyway.
Great. And I think our colleague Alana reached out to someone. I'm not quite sure if it was Eric or not, but that was pretty recently, like this week, if I'm remembering right. So she may or may not have heard back yet. I'm not sure.
This is going to require to speculate, and that's not what I mean by this question, but is part of this because we're not taking into account shared facilities we have with Hamilton? For example, we have the library and the rec center that's
Yeah.
just over the border in Hamilton that I know plenty of people in Wenham use. We have the community center.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
House,
Yeah.
community
They're
center.
not thinking of that as Wenham's. They're thinking, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that goes on at the community center,
Yeah.
Community house.
Community house.
community house.
You
Yeah,
repeated
sorry,
my
I was just there
mistake.
yesterday.
All right, and then I think this is our last element slide here. So public facilities and services. We heard from department heads just concerns about staff turnover and retention being a major concern, both at the staff level and leadership level.
Where?
Just from department heads, yeah, just in general, department managers.
That's completely changed in the last 7 months.
But that's not a very long period of time.
Well, I'm just telling you.
I've just been here through a lot of it, changes, not just the recent ones.
We have stability and a good vibe in this town hall, finally. And we hired a lot of new people.
Okay.
Do you agree?
I do agree. It's a good vibe. It's good vibes here now.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think that's a fair thing to have up on that slide, though.
I do.
I mean, even though we're getting better,
It has been
It's
an
been
issue.
tough.
It was a horrible issue.
Yeah.
How many town administrators did we go through in like 3 years?
But I also don't know that it was unique to Wenham. I mean, we had a particularly bad case of it, but it sounded like staffing concerns at towns across the region was difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's been tough for all the towns.
So maybe we should just say something like the town has been working hard to change this and to create more stability. And we can leave it at that
I
for now.
prefer that.
Yeah,
That seems good.
yeah.
Has been an issue is no longer.
And then we also heard desire for more transparency between Hamilton and Wenham, just especially around the budgeting. I think the budgeting process. Maybe there are other areas of transparency.
Well, I know, never mind. We've had joint meetings with the FinCom of both towns. That happens a lot more.
It happens a lot more. Okay.
And then we also have joint FinCom Select Board meetings. And then just to really get crazy, we have joint FinCom Select Board School Committee.
Hope you don't all ride on the same airplane to get there.
Are those regular, or how do they come about?
They're fairly regular, especially during the budget process. So it started back in
Trying to figure out where this
probably
is.
September
Oh.
for those joint meetings.
Have they happened in years
Full radius?
prior, or is this year different?
I don't know what it
I
is.
think they
wanna
started
find
doing
out.
it a year ago.
think
That
it
looks like
is.
the half month.
That's great to know.
It is, yeah. All right, here we
So there are improvements there as well. Okay. Okay, so the question then, just to end this part of the presentation, is Wenham ready for a shift? And you've done a number of studies. You do have development pressure. We should have added the Iron Rail feasibility study that Peter mentioned as well. And then you have the MBTA multifamily zoning requirements, which I know you're going to talk about on your next agenda item. So we just wanted to end this presentation with that general it's a rhetorical question right now. You don't need to answer it, but that's what we'll be trying to answer through this process. And so the next step on this, and then Beverly's going to talk about the phase that we're actually in, phase 2, the visioning phase, is that we've done one round of revisions and sent a deliverable on, I think it was December 22nd or 23rd, and we're in a second round of revision process. So we're just looking for comments. If there are any other things you'd like us to change, just send us your comments by February 28th, which will be a little over 2-month review period for this second review period. And then we're happy to make another round of changes on that.
That's for our chapter assignments, right?
All right. Beverly? Thank you.
That's a nice picture.
I don't think that's.
Question, Madam Chairman? Chairman?
Yeah, there was a question.
Just
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
Question. When we went to the Wenham Museum presentation, an excellent presentation you put on, one of the most startling statistics I remember that you told us, which was not mentioned, is how much of Wenham is wet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's in the
that
report.
was-
It's
To
like
me, if we're talking about future development, I
46%,
think,
I think.
was it 46%?
Something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it was even higher. than that.
in there and I took
It was even higher than that, because
It was
the
in there.
opportunities for non-sewered development,
Are limited
Are
when
very
you
limited.
have wetland.
and I lived here my whole town, my whole life, I didn't know that.
Maybe I'll
Yeah.
keep that in next time.
Yeah.
All right.
So good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I'll just talk briefly about the next phase that we are entering into. So phase 2 is about understanding what the community's wishes are for the future of Wenham. This is when we develop the vision. It is where we sort of bring together both the values and the ideas and the wishes for the future into a statement, an overarching statement. And then we also introduce some goals to support that statement for each of the chapters that we're working on. We try and identify some goals. In this phase, we will offer a variety of new engagement tools for the community, and that's true for every phase. We sort of circle back with the community, we invite them into that process, and they'll be engaged in collaborating with us on the development of the vision and the goals. Some of the things that we'll be working on are a meeting in the box, which we just finished the development of that tool, which is an interactive sort of geospatial tool. We can ask some questions that have a component to them that have a where component. Where would you like to see this component? And we just finished. We had 4 questions. Some of you may have provided input to that, and we very much appreciate that. We had the last round of input yesterday, and we're making those final edits. So thank you for those last-minute changes, and we are ready to get that launched. And so,
I think you meant the crowd map.
oh, I'm sorry, the crowd map. Yes, the crowd map. And Meeting the Box, I apologize, has been going on for quite a while. We're still operating that. I think at this point, I think you probably have a better count than I do because that's constantly changing. But we have, we've had a great deal of participation, and we are continuing to launch that tool with the community.
And for people who are out there listening, I don't know how many of them there are, but the meetings are at the library too, regular meetings on Thursday mornings.
10.
And in the evening on Wednesday.
Yep.
Evening on Wednesday.
And there are meetings in a box available in our office if anybody wants to
Yep.
host one.
Right, you can,
So-
get one of these, take it home, have your friends over, and say you might not have been able to go to the meeting at the museum back when they did the kickoff, but this is what's going on in town.
And this allows,
Beverage.
This allows our lake community members to host a meeting and sort of guide a participated conversation and provide feedback that we would incorporate into the plan as well. So yes, those have been well received, and they are still available.
Great.
And they will continue to through March 9th, so they'll close on March 9th. The community-wide survey, which we just launched, and I think it's being pushed out through social media. That tool, I think we'll start to see a lot of traffic on that, and that will be running also through March 9th. And we appreciate any comments that were provided to help finish the development of that.
Can you explain how to find it on the website?
So there should be a link right now on the master plan website, but I also believe there's going to be a push out through email blasts and social media coming from the town. So, but definitely if you go to the Wenham Master Plan Update website, you can find a link for that.
Thank you.
There is a permanent link on the front page of the town's website that just says Wenham Master Plan. If they click on that, it'll
I don't know if people can hear Margaret. I know this is on Wenham, so I just want to make sure people can hear
Sorry.
who are listening.
There is a permanent link on the front page of the town's website that says Wenham Master Plan, and when you click on that, it will take you to the master plan website, where you can find the link. You can find meeting in a box information, the link to the survey, and the crowd map.
And the crowd map.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you. And all of those, I think the crowd map is not quite up, but should be up very soon. Pop-up tabling is an idea that we have started to utilize. It is essentially meeting people where they are. It's not unlike meeting in the box, but it's where we might, or other representatives from the community might just go to an event. It could be a football event. It could be a farmer's market, and really just sit down and invite some input. We provide some materials and just ask some questions about the phase that we're in, or ideas. We might have a chart saying, where would you like to see, new development occurring in the community? We might ask questions. So pop-up tabling is something that's in development now, but it's really just sort of meeting people where they are, going to events. People who would not normally participate, who don't potentially come to meetings, town hall meetings, there's quite a few, or they're too busy, but just showing up where they are and potentially inviting some input on topics of interest. So this is something still in development. And then the Vision and Goals working sessions, which are going to be held on March 30th and April 6th, where we'll invite the community in and really do some heavy lifting on those, that vision statement and also the goals, development of the goals. And then we will continue to bring website updates to the community. You could always find information at the Wenham Master Plan website for all these tools that we've discussed, and as we move into future phases, there will be links available for that as well. And of course, we don't spend a lot of time talking about it, but all the public meetings and ultimately public hearings for adoption, all of those are also additional opportunities for the community to provide input, especially as we get a little further along. There's always that opportunity for folks to follow the agendas and to attend the meetings and to offer input to the boards when they're able to do that. Thank you. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joanne, did you have anything, did you wanted to say to the board or to the folks that are here as the chair of the committee?
I think we've covered everything pretty well. We're reviewing the existing conditions report. We'll have our comments back to Jen and her team later this month. The deadline's the 28th. And we're very, very busy with all of the public engagement, with the meetings in a box and the volunteer fair last night and now the survey and crowd map. So we should get a lot of good feedback. We've already had a lot of comments come in through meeting in a box. So we'll have a nice summary of that that Jen and her team are putting together for us, and that will help to inform the whole strategies development section that comes next.
Terrific, thank you.
I'll say this, that given what happened with the assessments, and then making meeting in a box meetings at the library, I think attendance is going to go up.
Yeah.
Because
I hope everyone comes engaged and with a creative mind about how to fix it and not just complain about it. I think that would be a really good thing.
And Peter, I think I mentioned this to you a few days ago, but I was out over the weekend speaking with some neighbors, and I can tell you the interest in the master plan and meetings in a box is high. I mean, I had several people just bring it up themselves as I was out there, so.
I would actually, I would give you a counterpoint. I think a lot of people in town are absolutely oblivious to what's going on because there's so little, there's no longer a Hamilton Wenham Chronicle. If you're not on the, I just
You
went and
are-
looked for the
I
Facebook
couldn't-
page in the last 10 days. Maybe it's just I'm an old guy. I don't use all this social media. So I would ask you, if your survey is going to be a really important part of this in the next couple of weeks, don't assume that people are going to go look at the website to find this. Hamilton has a nice sign in front of the police
Yeah.
station where they put community notices.
We do
Ask the
too.
fire station to put on, please send in your town survey by February 28th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, otherwise, people don't even know this is going on.
What is the deadline for the survey responses? Because it just went live, right?
as well.
So March 9th. So once the meeting in the box, because we now have those meeting in a box notices up there, the master plan notices are up on that sign.
Once we get to the town website, I found the town website was wonderful, the master plan description was wonderful, but you gotta know to go look for it. That's the problem.
Right. So maybe you're thinking about trying to get a notice of the survey up on the
Oh, yeah, we'll have
Sign.
them put it on the flashing sign.
flashy sign.
Other sign.
Probably doesn't meet our zoning ordinance for signs, but
do we have a sign on the door of the library about, hey, there are all these sessions happening here?
Yeah, there's a flyer at the library.
Is it okay.
Yep, it's a flyer. Do we need a sign? Any ideas
It's
that
on
you
the
have
door,
for
right?
outreach, please
I'll
let me
go,
know. Yeah.
I go to the library a lot. I'll go out,
Yeah,
convince
we
them
are-
to put it right on the door.
Yeah, we're actively looking for more areas to reach, for outreach.
all right, well, if that's the end of the master plan presentation, thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Well, do you want them to stick around for the MBTA discussion?
Well, I mean, oh yeah, please feel free. I don't know if other people are here to hear the next item on the agenda, which is an update on the MBTA community zoning requirements and where we are with that. So, Margaret, do you have a
I
little
can give
something
you-
to
I just give you a quick
say?
update.
She's just not quite ready yet.
Yeah, just to let
Take
the
time.
board know, we have submitted what's called an action plan to the state. The due date was January 31st. It was really just a form that we filled out, and we let the state know that we're working on the requirements for our zoning to fulfill the requirements for the MBTA communities. We have, I think you all know, we did get a technical assistance grant from Mass Housing Partnership for technical assistance to help us draft the zoning and to work through this process. And fortunately, we've been partnered with Jen Goldson.
Right.
You may be familiar with her. So we haven't fully contracted yet, Jen, that we haven't got the contract finalized yet, but we're thinking March, we should be having a kickoff. We do? Okay,
Yes,
great.
I just signed it,
Oh, good.
like last night or 2 nights
Okay.
ago.
Great.
And the
yeah.
contract isn't with you, it's with.
It's with MHP.
Right.
Yeah. So Jen will be providing those services. So there'll be a timeline of events. We'll do a little kickoff meeting and have some discussion. So the next deadline for MBTA communities for Wenham is not until the end of 2024, when we have to have our zoning in place. I anticipate having public outreach, having discussions with the community, because we haven't really talked about this very much, only because the guidelines and the regulations have been a little up and down. No one's been quite sure of what had to be done. But I feel like the regulations from the state are in place, and now we can start to move forward with more understanding, using Jen as our consultant.
And given that we share a train station with Hamilton, what's their process? I wonder if we need to be working together somehow.
Yeah, so we certainly will talk to Hamilton about it, but I did ask the state DHCD this question. We are responsible for our own half-mile radius around the, and for the number of units that it would be, even if we had a full circle around. So Wenham and Hamilton each have to fulfill the requirements ourselves. We can't piggyback on each other, or, in terms of numbers or size.
Right. Do they have the same set of deadlines we do, or?
They do. Yes, yeah. Every community, depending on what type of community you are, you have certain deadlines, and theirs are the same as ours.
Right.
Is there any kind of appeal process to the state or exemption process? Because I feel like we're in kind of a unique situation. I don't know how many other communities have the type of MBTA shared thing that we
Yeah.
have.
We haven't thought about that yet.
Yeah,
I mean, that's something we haven't really broached yet. I don't know whether that's a topic we could
And
discuss.
do we know what
as to the-
Hamilton's number is for their total units?
I don't, for sure.
It's in Exhibit A. I was looking on it, it's online. Our number and Hamilton's are both on the exhibit.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
$700.
I
It's
have
about
it sitting on my
twice
desk at home, but I don't remember what it
I
is.
would
Yeah.
think that
Together
we
it's about
are,
1,100.
I would hope that we would be aggressive in pursuing our relations with Hamilton, because it is very unique that we share the transport area. And also in a
do.
post-COVID world, it's interesting, and the law's been enacted, but I'm just a casual walker in town, and it's incredible, the drop in train usership.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're building all this infrastructure around something that might not be used.
Well, just to make sure everybody understands, we're not going to build anything. It's a zoning overlay zone, so it has to permit the building. So if there's not an economic driver for the building to be
Yeah.
built,
So,
it won't happen, but
It's a density rule, though,
it's a
right?
density
It's a
rule.
density rule saying they
Exactly.
want 25% more housing stock within a half a mile.
They want the housing concentrated around,
Down to.
yes, concentrated around the train stations as opposed to spread further abroad.
what was the town that decided, it's South Shore town, decided they wanted to get rid of their train station?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
somebody-
Is it Kingston?
Was it
Yeah.
Kingston?
Yeah.
They'll just
I
get
was
rid
part of the
it.
team that planned that line,
but-
so.
Didn't these,
Oh,
didn't they in October, the state say that only 20% had to be within the train station area? Meaning that
Where's-
80% could be outside of the half-mile radius?
I'm not sure, David. I think it depends on your community. Yeah, they'll give us those numbers.
That's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at how much is actually buildable in that half-mile radius. And so
Yeah.
they recognize that you can't put 1,100 new units within
Yeah.
a half mile of the station. So they're saying, we get that. You only have to do
Yeah,
220. I'm
right.
talking about both communities. And the remainder of it can be outside
Where,
of that zone.
where did you see this?
If you,
But that's within the,
think, yeah.
what does the contiguous parcel have to be? Is it
Right.
15 acres or something?
50,
50.
yeah.
For Wenham,
No.
it's only like 24 acres.
Right, in general, it was 50, but there are numbers, and I'm sorry, I don't have those in
No,
front
it's
of me.
been a while since we
Yeah.
looked at this stuff, so.
But we do, the numbers, we will have those calculations when we start the process. Yeah, there's a density requirement. 15
I
per
will-
acre.
We
and-
have another issue too, which is, I'm not sure we have enough water.
Yeah, I'll put this,
That's
I'm
another
gonna say,
question.
I'm gonna say this out loud.
That's a master planning
Somebody-
question, too.
Somebody needs to do a cost-benefit analysis of compliance versus non-compliance. And I hate to say that, it's an unpopular thing to say, but this is mind-boggling. 300, if all
really anything in Wenham.
365 units in Wenham, 1,100 units across the two towns were actually built as family-friendly housing, this would dramatically
Yeah.
increase the number of students in school. And you want to talk about what we just finished on the master plan in terms of where we're going to focus our development and redevelopment? There'd be no question about what we're doing in this town. It would be development of housing.
Well, again,
That's a-
it's a
Yeah, I agree with
zoning
you wholeheartedly.
overlay.
I did pull the numbers up. They are, it's 360, minimum multi-family unit capacity, 365, I think you knew that number. Minimum land area, 24 acres, 100 and developable stationary area, 20% of the district has to be located in the area, 20% of the district has to be, 20% of the district has to be located in the station area. Mhm.
However, 26 acres.
Of the land.
Yes.
So 5 acres of the 26
Yeah.
acres and 20% of the 365 units should be in
I
that.
don't know if it's, the units are not, I think it may have been the units at one point, but then I think they might have changed that.
I think you've raised the most important point we ought to know initially is what will be the cost of noncompliance, which is, I think it's infrastructure, roads, state funding being cut off.
Yeah.
And how much do we, over the last 10 years, take of that? How much over the next 10 years?
We have a state road running through town, so.
But I don't think, I mean, somebody said we didn't get any money under that
Yeah,
program.
and I think the 3 programs that the consequences would be you wouldn't get funding under these particular programs. I don't think Wenham currently does get any funding for these 3 programs. Hamilton.
And then there's
Does
the
that
cost of
include
the
the-
legal fees.
What was the program that the towns that missed their filing deadline, was it the affordable housing program? or-
No, it wasn't the affordable housing program. It was something that had to do with the housing authorities.
Okay.
They took money out.
They took money away from housing authorities, and they did that in Hamilton. But in Wenham, I don't know if, I talked to our housing authority, and they didn't feel like they utilized the funding. But I have to
I don't think we
flesh that
should
out with
assume
them.
that.
I wouldn't assume
Dan, do you
it.
know whether any other town is challenging this by just not non-compliance?
I
It's
think,
in
isn't
litigation.
Rockport suing?
Is it
Rockport,
Rockport?
Rockport file suit?
That I don't know. I know that 7, well, talk to the microphone. I know that 7 communities didn't file their action plan by the requirement, so we have an indication
But
that,
we don't know why.
we don't know why, but now they are non-compliant.
Right.
Yeah, those 7 communities, they're mostly on the South Shore. I think it's Marshfield, Situate, I forget all 7, but,
Hamilton also did not file.
oh, Hamilton
They
didn't
have
file.
Yeah,
filed
they
now,
have
though.
since then,
Yeah.
yeah. I think they just didn't think it.
But I've
applied.
heard, I haven't verified this, but I did hear that somebody filed suit. I
Right.
thought it was.
That could be, yeah, I didn't hear, but that could be.
Yeah.
May I speak to our scope a little bit when it's
Yeah.
appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to take the question first and then,
I was just gonna say, Dave, I think you're right. I mean, we have to have the conversation at some point because I don't think we've really done that. We haven't really started this process yet, and that, I think, is question 1, whether it makes sense for us to go through with this or not, because this,
So how do we do the cost-benefit analysis?
Well, I think we want to really wait till we know,
Figure out how much
we
it
wanted to
costs.
wait till we know for sure what this will look like in Wenham before we decide whether or not we're going to do it. And we've been waiting for technical assistance to get that done.
But we
So-
do now know the number and the size of the area and the proportion's got to be there. So I would respectfully suggest that you said they don't have to get built. If as a matter of right, like a 40B, you come in and say.
right, no, it is a
"Town,
matter of right.
You've got to have 365 units, add 25% to your housing stock, and if a developer looks at it, and I think it's a 15 units per acre, right, versus
Right.
1 unit per acre, 15 per, so you take the 5 acres and say 75 units now have to go right next to the train station. They come in and they say, just as we've had the big fight in your neighborhood, what's, the only issue that's gonna hold it up, I imagine, is going to be septic, and wetlands.
Water.
And water potentially, but.
Well, and it's also, I also think,
Once
we're-
we create the zone, be almost sure that you're gonna have economic incentives to go ahead.
To do it, but I think that there's a limited amount of capital for this kind of development, and I'm not sure it's all gonna land in Wenham. Just respectfully, I think we have to think of this as part of the broader picture of the state. I agree that there definitely is gonna be incentive for that kind of activity to happen around train stations closer to the city. I
So
don't know
I
about
agree.
Wenham.
I agree with both of you. You're right that it's not obviously not all going to land here, but you're right as well that once you have
Could
a zoning
eventually
district that
land.
is by right,
Yeah.
if it's by right, somebody can come in and
Tell me I put
Do that.
15 units on my 1 acre.
Right.
It makes it a very valuable acre.
Right,
Valuable.
if you can discern that you have someone who wants to live there and purchase it, yeah.
I'm confused about the filing deadline. Somebody said 7 have not done it. What is the filing deadline?
There are in the statute, there are certain requirements that you have to meet by certain dates. And I think the initial filing was, you said the end of January, just explaining
This
what
was
you're
the
doing.
Yeah, this was the second
Did we do-
filing.
We did that? Okay.
We did. Yeah, so we're in compliance until the end of 2024.
So it strikes me from what you showed us in the excellent current conditions report, the one little sliver that is commercially zoned up that's near the train station, you're gonna have a.
It's the
initial
farm.
What?
It's the horse farm.
The horse farm.
Yeah.
That, you're gonna have an initial conflict there between commercial zoned development and now the multifamily 15 units per acre. And if that's the only place.
Unless it's multi-use and it's commercial on the first floor and it
yeah.
goes up.
So I hope you're all, when you're doing the planning, to me, this has gotta be right up there along with the commercial zoning in juxtaposition. And to me, as a town resident, I asked you about the expenses at the beginning, it's really helpful to have you advise to us how residential additions will impact our budget
Right.
5 and 10 years down. And I just was driving out on the radio and NPR was saying, oh, the NIMBYism, they're all wrong. There is no problem with you're overtaxing your school system and your infrastructure. And I can't believe that when it costs $24,000 per kid to educate them in the town of Wenham.
There you have it.
I would just say, and I don't want to get too high on my soapbox.
Oh, yes, you do.
I kind of do. I mean, the train runs once an hour. We're gonna put 1,100 units around a train that runs once an hour.
We're not putting them.
Yeah, and
I understand.
that's a
I
high
understand.
number too, Dave. I think it's lower.
I'm saying, I mean, what's Hamilton? Sorry, Hamilton is how many? Is 700 something?
Yeah, I have the number here.
720, I think.
Yeah, and we're
It really isn't.
365.
731.
It's a policy that's thinking about economic development around public transit. And it's thinking about urban public transit, I think.
Yeah.
The
And
bus
we're not
stops at
it,
Stop and Shop.
so-
The bus doesn't come up here. I mean, how about if former Governor Baker had said you got to bring the buses through as well? The buses should run all the way up to Newburyport. You know, they don't. There's no car share. There's no infrastructure to support this level of housing density. They just said, well, figure it out on the back end. It's totally
built it, they will
inappropriate.
come.
So, look, I'm all for increasing the housing stock. I'm all for affordable housing. I love to go over to my friends and in-laws' houses and shake in their face 12% we have here under 40B in Wenham. That is awesome. That's a badge of pride for our community. Let's take it up to 14. I don't understand what to me is ostensibly a boon to for-profit developers. That is what this was. I don't know if it was the MBTA or the for-profit developers. Somebody was like, we're gonna have by right condos all over this state. What else is this? I don't understand. Unless you give infrastructure money, true infrastructure development, this is totally an unfunded mandate. And I just think we have to do the cost benefit analysis as a community to figure out if we want to even comply with this.
Here, here.
I think we agree with that.
May I I know that we need to get going and we've got a bit of a drive ahead of us. So I hope you don't mind me interrupting. But I just wanted to describe our scope of work, just to make sure that you understand what we can do and what we can't do. Mass Housing Partnership has really confined our scope to, number one, it needs to be done by June. They really want it done in 4 months, but they're giving us a teeny bit of leeway.
Just describe the it.
I will.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty quick, and it does not include any community engagement. It doesn't even include a public meeting like this. It's really an academic exercise that we can tell you what are the scenarios under which you could comply. Doesn't mean you're going to do it, but we can just tell you if you took this land in this particular area, including all of these particular parcels, and you ran the analysis, there's a whole Excel spreadsheet that's a model. We'll do that for you. We'll draw the maps, and we'll run through different scenarios with you, and we can leave you, our scope includes writing the zoning for you. You don't have to adopt it. You can change it, but we can do all of that for you it's basically a 4-month time frame. Unfortunately, they're not including any public engagement in that. I do know you can get some help, technical assistance help from CHAPA, has some money to do public engagement. So if you wanted to hire or I don't know if it's hiring them, but going through them, it's some kind of grant program that they're running. So just to throw that out there.
Well, step one is definitely the scenario development, so we can really know what we're talking about, because we're sort of sitting here kind of trying to guess. Then when we see it, we can know what we'll do next.
Right.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you. It's good to see you. I'm glad we were here for this.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot.
Are you going to include in your impact the housing authority here, that's already here in Wenham?
It's only about the zoning. It's not about what you have already.
Okay.
But you could, in the scenarios, you could include that with potential zoning districts, right? Because it's already.
It has to be within the.
You have to exclude publicly owned lands unless it actually has redevelopment potential. So like the Iron Rail property, you could include that because it has development potential. But something like Town Hall or even a housing authority, which is already developed, you wouldn't include that. It would be excluded.
Include a housing authority as
I believe it.
redevelopable.
Well, that's a good question. You can make some manual adjustments if you think it really is redevelopable. You have to.
It absolutely
Right on
is.
the train station.
Okay, you have to just justify it to DHCD and tell them why you think it is
Well, not be a
realistic.
hard lift.
Okay.
It's already zoned multifamily, so I'm just saying, as you're going to.
No, it's a good idea, yeah.
Please include a discussion with the housing authority, because that is the most easily redevelopable authority, property within this whole footprint.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
In terms of zoning, it's
Oh, yeah.
already multifamily
Oh, yeah.
zoning.
No, I'm not arguing that. No.
Okay.
And does the town own that property, or does the state, the feds?
State,
State?
state-owned,
State.
yeah.
Yeah, so that would be an easy lift as part of the plan.
Yeah.
It's my only point is a redirection there.
What's,
It's the housing authority itself owns that.
how's,
It's often large.
how are you gonna, yeah, no, I mean, what about Gordon? Is that already
Gordon's not
zoned multifamily?
No, nothing in Wenham is
Nothing in
zoned for
Wenham is zoned
multifamily.
Oh, that's
The
right.
only zoning we have is residential, single-family zoning,
Thank you to
And
the,
some small business
to
zoning.
the plan
I thought there
from
was an overlay
1960.
possibility of what, the overlay that they used on Penguin Hall can be applied to Gordon. And that's why they want to put 350 units on the Gordon 75 acres.
Yeah, but, well, we don't have an application for that, so they've talked about it,
I think
but.
that's kind of died, frankly.
Yeah, I hope so.
Actually, we
Can I
got a
ask
call
this, just
today.
as a planning board, to me as a citizen, I'm very concerned about the cost of, what you said, unfunded expenses that come from new development. And I know that there are lots of towns and cities that require developers that pay a lot of money, buy new fire trucks, do all these other things because of the unfunded costs that come, and that the tax base by itself won't do. And the most fundamental one I wanted to ask, if you all are familiar and will be taking into account, is how much does every new child brought into the town of Wenham add to the incremental cost of our budget? And how many, what sort of property assessment would it take to being reimbursed for that child. And I've been told many other places that in fact, new development really does add an additional burden, which is why so many of these towns and cities actually have the additional assessment on developers for the new lots in order to recoup some of that additional cost. So does someone guide you all when you're looking at your long-term planning, how these individual projects will impact the expense side of the equation? And I know you're worried about development itself.
I think that's what he was suggesting, the guy from Cambridge Econometrics, was what they're going to do is they're going to talk about what the options are and what the impact is to the town of the various options. I don't know that it gets down to the level of how much does each additional child cost, but, well, some students don't use the school, so, particularly in a town like Wenham where it is wealthier and a lot of kids go to private school, but, so I don't know that you can quite make that.
I did some really quick math at the annual meeting last year, and I saw the $35 million budget, joint school budget, and 1,200 kids, and said, well, wait a minute, this isn't very hard math to figure out. It's about $24,000.
Right.
And yet we say we're doing a great job because for 6,000 or 7,000 we get kids in from Essex and Salem, or used to come from Essex, and we're lowering our expense by bringing in a $24,000 kid at $6,000. So imagine.
But that's a school district,
Is that a school
it's a school district issue. I don't think we can talk about the benefits and costs of various kinds of land development, but I don't think we're going to get into this level of detail.
So just at sort of a 30,000 foot, this isn't going to answer your question specifically, but we can't be intentionally exclusionary for developments that are going to bring school children into the district, because then you get into constitutional issues. Yeah. So it depends what's in front of us. Like if somebody is presenting a subdivision to us, there are certain things that we have to look at under the subdivision statute, but that's a partial response to your question, but.
Right.
I think though it bears a little bit more emphasis, because I think you all are engaged, and I think this is an important point. When we have a subdevelopment proposal come before us, we look at what the rules and regulations are for whether or not there is a right to subdevelop. And if the subdevelopment meets the criteria, if that is the opinion, then our hands are relatively limited in terms of whether or not what we can do with respect to that subdevelopment as it currently exists. And that's a challenge for us because these rules were written in 1980. It's almost as bad as a master plan that was written in 1960, because the considerations around subdevelopment in 2023 are a lot different than they were in 2080, both fiscally and environmentally.
Yep.
And so there is language, I believe, in the subdevelopment rules and regs that offers us some form of discretion so long as we have something that we can point to support the decisions that we make, so that they're not arbitrary and capricious. And so if we have a master plan that articulates certain community values, that is maybe a sufficient basis, subject to Margaret and Town Council advising us, that we could take certain actions with respect to subdevelopment. If what comes to the master plan process is that, yes, in fact, the Ipswich River is a top 10 endangered river in the United States, and we have a water resource issue, we have support in the community record for how we approach a new subdevelopment that wants to further use the water that's out there, as a hypothetical example that's not related to anything before us. That's why the master plan is so incredibly important, because it can guide what limited discretion all the boards and committees in this town have relative to what state law prescribes that we have to do. That's why everyone really needs to get involved with this master plan process and make it the most robust document possible. I'm really on my soapbox tonight, aren't I?
Yeah, you're my
I just have one
spokesman.
question about, Maple Woods was age restricted. I was on the Affordable Housing Committee when it was created.
Do you mind
And I went
identifying
through-
yourself?
What?
Would you mind
I'm
identifying?
Jared Ward, I'm sorry, 24 Mayflower.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I was on the Affordable Housing Committee when we originally put it forth, and it only took 10 years to get the town to come around, but they did. That's age restricted. So I get, you can't discriminate against children, but there is you can age restrict a community.
We have actually an overlay zone for, I forget what it's called, senior housing or something.
The
Okay.
MBTA communities regulation will not allow for age
Well,
restriction.
that's where I was going with this.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
I assume that the statute that was recently passed, because I know DHCD wants family housing.
Yeah, that's what their goal
priority,
is here.
And we were very lucky to get capital allocated to Maple Woods on an age-restricted basis, but, okay.
Yeah.
And so if you had in our master plan, you explained how in 1960 we said we want to be residential, and lo and behold, 98% of our revenue comes from residential taxes.
Correct.
If we had a long-term plan that said we wanted to have 20% commercial in our revenue base, would that empower you when looking at the horse farm? Say the horse farm ought to be an office building instead of a, 75-unit apartment building. Would that help? Is that the sort of thing that?
I mean, it would help us negotiate with a developer who came in and try to get some mixed use there. I don't think we don't have I don't think we have the basis to turn it down. A resident, unless our zoning said no residential development in a commercial area, but we can't do that because it's within the MBTA radius, so, and it's of right. But it would certainly help us to negotiate. What happens with development, and you know this, you come into town hall and you have a plan and you talk to the staff and you figure out what works for everyone. I think a plan that identifies on a land use map where we want to see certain kinds of development in town would certainly help us. It would not only help us negotiate, but it would provide incentives for developers to think, oh, that's not, they don't want to keep a horse farm there. I'm just making this up, This does have potential as a commercial or office or a multi-use. Because multi-use seems to me to be the win-win, some commercial, some office, some residential above that's affordable, because that's the other thing.
That's what's gonna happen at Gordon Conwell.
Well,
I actually went to a meeting
Oh, did
2
you?
weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to
and
ask you
it's gonna be
about that.
It's gonna be probably life sciences, 40B, and some residential.
So a lot of these questions are going to be bigger than just this board, too. They're going to
Right.
require
Well, that's certainly
greater involvement from the town, whether that's town meeting or I'm sure the select board is going to be talking about a number of these issues that come through here as well. But
Yeah.
especially the MBTA communities legislation. I mean, we need to kick off the process here, which it's great that Jen said that she's going to do the scenario so we can see what it actually looks like.
Right,
And then we
exactly.
can-
Instead, we're
then
just
we can have a-
speculating. And it's always
conversation, not in
worse
the
when you're
abstract.
speculating.
Right. So once we can see what it actually looks like and whether, then we can get into what you're talking about, David, which is, does it make sense for us?
Yeah.
The timetable, from what I'm understanding, is that our bylaw is supposed to have been passed by the town by the end of next year.
No, the end of
In
2024.
2024.
Right.
Yeah, so the end of next year.
So
And it
that
takes a
actually,
long time to get
town
things
meeting
done.
cycle, we're gonna have this decision made on this, on what.
But she's going to be done with her work, she said, by June.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it over the summer.
And then there could
And
be a
that
special town
gives us
meeting if need be.
15 months.
So I'm sorry if I was asking you economics questions that should be going to the finance committee.
No, it's totally fine. And, we can answer questions. But, like any other board and commission in the U.S., we're only authorized to do what we're authorized to do. We're not authorized to do more than we're authorized to do, and we have to do it under the constraints of the state and federal constitution. So the question is, what is this going to say when we're through with the master plan? Do we need to make some zoning changes? Do we need to, revise our land use map and say this is what we want?
Which those are going to be town meeting votes, right?
Those are town meeting votes. Right, that's implementation, but we gotta have the
Town
plan
meeting
first.
2024.
The overarching issues like water and septic, if you wanna put potentially 365 units, 15 per acre in a town that doesn't have sewer and is 60% wet, will that stop, even if you create the zone and say, okay, you can have 15 per unit, but if there's no way for them to meet your wetlands and septic requirements, that's not gonna override, is it?
So,
Well, you have to
so
be able to-
what we're talking about with the zoning district is we have to create an overlay district, right?
Correct.
So it just means we have to create an area where these rules apply. So then practically speaking, whether somebody can actually develop it, that's a separate question. And if,
Right.
if they can't because of water or septic or whatever, wetlands, whatever it is, then they can't.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That's why I'm less concerned about this maybe than I should be, because once you do, if you just do the overlay by area, there's not gonna be a lot of developable land. That's why I keep coming back to.
Well, I think there,
Comes back to the housing.
there has to be
authority.
developable, there has to be some developable land
There-
within
there
the.
is some.
Any, I'm just saying,
Like, we can't say, here's our 24-acre parcel of wetlands. We can't do
no,
that.
I'm not saying that, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, sorry.
What I'm saying is, if I understand, you're not required to cherry pick pieces of developable land.
No,
in
you're
your
not.
municipal district.
And in fact, it's,
Okay, so you can do your, that's my point, you can do your pie, and
this is
by-
my view.
Yeah, by
this is-
definition, there ain't gonna be a lot in that pie, and so do the pie, and, okay, it's done, and that's why I keep coming back to the housing authority, because that's probably one of the areas.
Right, so that's why what Jen is doing now, what the consultant is doing now, is what
Huge.
we
It's
need.
gonna be really helpful.
She said, oh, no, you can't do that. I would respectfully nudge her in that direction.
No, and we've had, at previous meetings, we've talked about that issue already, so.
And
Yeah.
so if you just draw the pie, if there's some wetlands in there, well, so be it, But that's why I don't think it's as big a deal as perhaps it's being made up.
Well, this is, yeah.
Sorry.
You go home now.
All right, I think we have to table this item. It's 8:30, and we still have, there's still another thing on this table.
Do the
Did you
minutes?
want to talk to us about
Oh,
this?
yes, I just need your signatures on that.
What, the
We've
minutes?
done it every year.
At this time, I would like to remind your planning board the necessity of your
It's for the,
compliance with
Registry of
Chapter
Deeds.
41 by keeping your,
Second page.
they want our
I read the minutes.
signatures.
Yeah, you do it every year. They say.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Tiny-
Thanks for coming
Yeah,
and
really, thank you
participating.
for
Thank you.
participating. That's
Yeah.
great. What'd I do with my pen? Here it is.
Yeah, if you could just
As what?
I don't think it has an apostrophe.
I'll
print
do
your
the
name
sample.
and then sign it.
Well, I saw one missing.
There's little tiny things in here, yeah.
I do proofing for the select board with Catherine.
Did you all see the minutes?
Yeah, I
These
sent
have
minor edits
Dan's
to.
edits in it.
Oh, they do?
I highlighted Dan's
Oh,
edits.
election appointment, month, day, year.
I'll fill
month.
those in here.
right.
You
Yeah.
better.
I just need your, and then on the bottom, do you need to sign on the
Are you still
bottom
the
too? That's for the A and R.
Oh, the A&Rs, yeah,
Yeah, do the same
that
on the
again?
bottom.
They had you and Peter, as we had two Community Preservation Committee representatives. Isn't it Rick
Yes.
now? It's not Peter?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
So we should
Yeah,
take,
we'll have her
take
amend
that
that.
off, yeah. Okay, that's me. You wanna follow the
see that?
pattern?
Good
Out
job.
of the CPC.
May I borrow that?
Yeah.
Bless you.
Oh,
So I have a little thing on my car where I can just stick it to the. If there's, is there any metal around here? I can show you.
I'll fill in the dates, and just on the bottom.
Yeah, there was nothing major in my edits.
Peter, I need your signature on this.
coming.
No,
What are we signing?
This is
For the Registry of Deeds, every year they need your
signature on
signatures so
file.
that when you get, if they get a plan from you,
Does
they'll.
it have to be
It
black?
doesn't look like, it doesn't have to be, I don't think.
I
Does
don't
it
think
say
so.
on the front?
Does it say black?
It doesn't say, I don't believe.
What are we signing?
The
Uh,
Registry of Deeds needs the planning board signatures
It
on
just says
file.
including their
So that
signatures.
if
It
they
doesn't say
get a
anything about
plan
black ink
sent
or
to them, they have your
ink.
signature on file.
It doesn't say anything about it?
No, it
Okay.
doesn't, no.
Just print and
Thank you
then-
so much for this.
I'm sorry you didn't have any glasses. That was
Well, I
good.
left my water bottle sitting on the counter at home. And
That's pretty funny that your middle name is Brewster, because we had Brewster Lee sitting in the back of the,
I know, and I think he's a relation somehow. It's been a very long time.
I'll steal your pen.
Okay.
I got one of those families where I'm
my,
related to everyone in
wanna use that pen.
Massachusetts somehow.
Yes.
Do we want to
Same one.
vote on these minutes?
I think we should. I could take a. Do these minutes reflect Dan's edits?
yes.
They do.
Sorry.
Excellent. That's why I didn't see
Except
anything.
for,
Did-
I had a comment about, I wasn't sure if, they say both Peter and Rick are the CPC representatives, so it's just, it should just say
It should
Rick.
just say, Rick, yes.
Yep.
So we'll have her
Okay,
amend
so
that.
And then my
Can-
other things were nits, like apostrophes.
Well, they're already in here,
And
so.
they're already in there, yeah.
So can I have a motion to accept these as amended?
So
Just
moved.
with amendments as suggested just now.
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
Oh, yes, I see. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you. So Pascarella moved.
So-
Second. 4-0.
Do we have something else to discuss?
Any items
Any
not
other items
anticipated?
not anticipated? I don't have
I
one.
do want to let the board know that I got a call today from Essex Petrie from Pulte Homes. The, yeah. Did you talk to him?
No. What's
called
going
today.
on?
He said that they're still working on it.
So it
they're-
hasn't disappeared.
He did, no, they haven't disappeared. Their challenge is still trying to get water from Salem Beverly Water Board, but he feels like.
They want to
they're-
hook in, right?
Yeah, they want to
Yeah,
be.
they have to hook into Salem Beverly for water and sewer. So they're working on that. But he just wanted to touch base, make sure we knew they're still out there.
Oh, dear.
So doesn't
That's too
Gordon
bad.
College get their water from Beverly?
They do.
They do. That's
Gordon
why
College
they
does,
guys
yes.
think they can too.
And they do have an agreement, I think, with Salem Beverly that if they develop, they can tie into it. But once they sell the land, I don't think that agreement still stands, so, yeah. But they're not gone. They're still trying, so
Still lurking.
they wanted to let us know that.
So,
I think,
so I went to another one of those, Bruce Tar, North Shore,
water
Well,
task.
water,
and so and
Confab.
we actually, 3 things happening by the end of June. One is hire a consultant to look at ways to level water across the watershed, okay?
and defined as all the way out to where?
Pretty far.
Yeah,
It's almost to Burlington.
right, that's what I thought.
And then hire a hydrologic modeling expert who can then model the options.
Okay.
And then just, the third thing, it's as simple as having somebody talk to all of the towns and find out what water projects they have planned for the next couple of years. And then, just so they can better coordinate.
Well, that should
And
be
that's all-
going
and-
on anyway.
And we don't have to pay for any of that, and it's all gonna be done by June.
Okay.
I have a question.
And so I talked to Eric Mansfield after we walked out, and I was like, Eric, you've been watching this for a long time. I said, how do you feel about this? And he goes, it certainly seems like Bruce Tar is actually getting shit done.
Good.
So here's my question to that.
Plus.
Is this whole undertaking going to be voluntary for all the towns that are involved? Because you could go through this whole process, right? And
And Beverly,
at the end of the day, like Beverly Salem
It's
could just say,
voluntary
no,
now.
thanks.
they're all in the room.
I know they're in the room.
It's voluntary now, right?
Right.
It's an MOU and
Yeah.
everyone's
We'll see.
dancing together. But the minute it comes down to, oh, this is gonna mean you have to cut your water use.
Right.
So we'll see.
So
Can't hurt
do
to
we-
try.
Right. So on a parallel path, right? Do we, as a small town that actually has the name of the lake that Beverly and Salem uses, do we want to
And a motto that
explore
means enough water.
for just, is there a path for just Wenham to get into some kind of new arrangement for water supply?
Well, Hamilton's got a problem too. So does Manchester's got a bit of a problem.
Topsfield has a problem.
Topsfield has a problem.
Right. No, I get it, but
So just basically,
I'm not saying, no, no,
Stick
no,
a
I'm-
pipe
I'm
all
not-
the way to
I'm not saying
Water
that. I'm
Lake.
saying
Do that.
just exploring what are the
Just for us.
potential routes for the town of Wenham.
I think Eric, I'd have to talk to Eric, because I think there's a history there. And they basically, they run their water department as a profit center.
I used to know this, but how far north does it, because I was on the advisory board, how far north does a MWRA hookup go? How,
Oh. I don't know.
it might be Melrose or Malden
I don't know.
I don't even know if
I
Saugus
get the
maybe.
feeling that it goes further north the further west you are, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
I
remember.
don't know whether there's some sort of barrier to entry there.
But anyway, my point on this, and so
I'll
you sit
look
in,
into
I mean, you're on the select board too, right? So we're a town of 5,000 people, right? So if there's some path there for, a tiny municipality we might have options that a whole conglomerate of towns don't have.
In terms of tapping into Wenham Lake?
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, Dan, I'll talk to Eric,
Yeah, I'm just floating it.
because I'm sure there's a history.
No pun intended.
Oh, there's definitely history.
It's good.
Okay,
I do want to let the board know too, Maplewoods has opened their application period for the, yeah, and they started construction
I saw
off
that.
on Maple Street. I don't know if anyone's seen it. So,
I went
construction
by,
started,
yes.
and applications are available here at Town Hall and online at Harbor Light, so.
It's awesome.
Great.
Everyone knows, yeah,
Great,
It's awesome.
exciting.
took a while, but there we are.
There we are.
So Anna Seedzlek.
Seedzik, yeah. She works for Harbor Light. She's also on our school committee.
She's stepping
was?
down.
Okay.
But she's the one who leases.
She's managing their lottery and
Yeah.
Right.
the application process. And she's from Wenham.
She is.
Yeah, she's cool.
So if we have no further matters, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion that we adjourn this planning
Planning board meeting,
of the
February 9th,
February 9th at
2023 at
8:48.
8:48 PM. Need a second?
To be resumed on.
To be resumed on March 9th,
Thursday, March 9th.
2023. I will not be here for that, just to say.
7 p.m.
At 7 PM. I can do it by Zoom if there's a hybrid link.
I second.
All right. We don't know yet whether it will be on Zoom or not, so I'll leave that part out. I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Yes, aye.
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 Or nothing? Thank you.
All right, guys.